why you should never split the difference, how pessimism makes you dumb, and why kidnappers are just, quote, businessmen trying to get the best price. All right. Hey ho, let's go. Welcome, my legendary friends, to this episode of Legends and Losers, and we have got an amazing dialogue with former FBI hostage negotiator Chris Voss, and he's the author of a great book called Never Split the Difference. And this is a legendary dialogue. If I ever had one, I'll tell you that. So I'm stoked that you're joining us. Now, off the top, you probably noticed that I like to say, hey ho, let's go, not just at the beginning of the show, but that's just something I say in life. And the reason I say that in life is the Ramones are my favorite band. And if you've been listening to Legends and Losers for a while, you know that. And they are the category designers of punk rock. Now, I got to tell you, I had an extraordinary thing happen recently, and this is just, it's an example of how cool you are with me. In other words, Legends and Losers has given me a connection to people that I never could have imagined. And so I just want to share a little bit with you about a gal I've gotten to know digitally named Kim Bolin. So Kim became a fan of Legends and Losers, and she reached out to me a while ago, and we had a fun banter, a digital banter, and she seems like an absolute riot. Anyway, one of the things she told me that knocked me over is that she gave Legends and Losers to her brother for his birthday. First of all, it was a very, very good price for Kim. But the thing I thought was so cool about that is that, you know, in the old days, we used to give each other, you know, the box set of whatever for Christmas or our birthday or what have you. You used to get DVDs and CDs and shit. And of course, we don't have those things today. But regardless, Kim gave her brother Legends and Losers as a gift. So I thought that was very cool. And I highly recommend you giving Legends and Losers to people that you love in your life as well. I know I'm trying to. Now, why do I bring up Kim? So we had this fun banter. And it turns out, and I don't know how specific I can get here, so I'll just say this. She has a friend that has some very strong connections to the Ramones. Let me just say it that way. And so she put together, through her friend, a care package of unbelievable Ramone shit. So if you're on YouTube, you can see this awesome Ramones skull and crossbones t-shirt that I'm currently wearing. Another t-shirt, this white one, says, hey ho. I should show it to you if you're on the screen here. Hey ho, let's go t-shirt. Everybody needs a hey ho, let's go t-shirt. Excellent, Kim. This one, very, very steezy as well. The Ramones Archie comic t-shirt. I never saw that one before. It's absolutely fantastic. She sent the old duder a Ramones sweatshirt. Very, very cool, with the Ramones president seal logo on it. And she sent me this awesome hey ho, let's go hat. So Kim, I don't know what I did to deserve you, but incredibly sweet of you, incredibly generous of you, and you have touched my heart, and I want to thank you so much for my wonderful Ramones care package, and I will toast to you with my Ramones coffee mug. All right. Chris Voss served his country, the United States of America, for 24 years in the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He trained in the art of negotiation with the FBI, at Scotland Yard, and at Harvard Law School. During his time with the FBI, Chris served as the lead crisis negotiator for the New York City division of the FBI. Get your head around that. Like, imagine being the lead crisis negotiator for the FBI in New York frickin' City. Unbelievable. This next one is a stunner as well. He was a member of the New York City Joint Terrorist Task Force for 14 years. He was the case agent on such famous cases as the Blind Shake case, the TWA Flight 800 catastrophe, and he negotiated the surrender of the first hostage taker to give up in the famous Chase Manhattan Bank robbery and hostage taking. Chris was also the lead international kidnapping negotiator for the FBI. The lead international kidnapping negotiator for the FBI. I mean, I can barely get my head around it. He also was the FBI's representative on the National Security Council's hostage working group. During his FBI service, Chris received the U.S. Attorney General's Award for Excellence in Law Enforcement. As well, he was acknowledged by his peers, the FBI Agents Association. They gave him the award for Distinguished and Exemplary Service. So think about this. He got these two extraordinary awards, one from his superiors and one from his colleagues. Today, Chris teaches business negotiation in the MBA program as an adjunct professor at the University of Southern California and at Georgetown University. He's also an entrepreneur. He's the founder and CEO of a training consulting firm called the Black Swan Group. And he and I share a publisher, Hollis, at HarperCollins. And he is the author of a book that came out the month, I think, before Play Bigger. So a month before we did. So I think last May. Anyway, it's in the show. You'll hear it in our dialogue. His book's called Never Split the Difference. And I've read it. It's great. Its subtitle is Negotiating as if your life depended upon it. And when you read the blurbs and stuff about the book, Chris talks about why everything we've been taught about negotiation is wrong. And I took some negotiation courses early in my business career, and he tells me exactly what I've been doing wrong for these years. It's an incredibly fascinating discussion because there are business dynamics and implications, and he tells fabulous stories about being in the FBI and working as a hostage negotiator. So Chris has been in Inc., Huffington Post, CNBC, Fortune, Fast Company, Business Insider, Time Magazine, and now here he is on Legends and Losers. So Chris, how do you get a terrorist to give up their hostages safely? How do you do that?
You know, it's not that hard. I mean,
really?
Yeah, it's not that hard. I mean, I remember, all right, so you say in any negotiation, you say stuff that catches people off guard, makes them wonder what you're going to say next. And several years ago, I was brought in to help build the national hostage negotiation team in the United Arab Emirates. And before I sat down finally to meet with a member of the royal family, the sheikh that was going to give the yes or no on it, who was an interesting cat. I mean, this guy was American educated, completely Americanized. And before I go in and meet the sheikh, the guy that walks me in says, understand, if any Islamic terrorists, whether it be Shia or Sunni, take hostages here in the UAE, the sheikh wants to kill them. You know, he doesn't want this happening here. So this is not a warm and fuzzy guy. And so I sit down with this guy and he says, all right, so somebody's got one of my citizens hostage. What are you going to coach my people to say to get them out? And I said, I'm going to want one of your guys to say, what you're doing is a great thing. And the sheikh's mouth fell open. He was shocked. And he said, and that's exactly what your guys are going to do, because right now you can't wait to hear what I'm going to say next. You were shocked. You were caught off guard. I've got 1,000% of your attention, and that means I've got you. And he nodded and he said, you know, and they hired me. He said, you get the job. So yeah, you know, from the other side's perspective, what's going to startle them in a good way so much that they just can't wait to hear what you're going to say next. That's the essence of any great negotiation.
And is there a play for what you say after what you're doing is a really great thing, or is it just you need to catch them off guard and get the conversation rolling?
Well, because what they feel, it's great, it's true. Now let's define great. That becomes a whole completely different definition, a completely different discussion. I mean, I know the word that I'm using, and it's in the eye of the beholder. It's like beauty. So, you know, let's talk about what great is. And then at the end of the day, let's take an example for a terrorist, but it could be anybody. It could be a professional athlete. You know, what everybody's striving for, what I talk about in my book is, you know, what's your religion? I mean, what's more important to you that you will sacrifice everything else in your life on behalf of it? Now, some people, their religion is themselves. That's sociopathic serial killer. Those guys, why do those guys let themselves get caught and go to jail? Because their religion is themselves. And as long as they're still alive, then they have the opportunity to manipulate people. They don't care if it's in jail or it's out on the street.
Do you think they want to get caught, the serial killer?
They don't necessarily want to get caught, but they always want to have somebody, that type of person always wants to have somebody to victimize and manipulate. So they don't care where it is. They are their own religion. But, everybody has something they believe in more than themselves. Like Ted Leonsis, the owner of the Washington Wizards and basketball team and the Capitals, the hockey team. When he talks about sports, and Leonsis as an owner, he talks about empathy all the time. He's one of those guys who's a great practitioner of it, doesn't really understand how good he is at it. But he knows there's something to this. All right, so two things about Leonsis as a sports team owner. He gets along great with the city he's in. Could you say that about the now Las Vegas Raiders? Could you say that about how many sports teams are the Chargers went from San Diego to Los Angeles. The Rams, how many cities have they been in? How many sports teams owners cannot get along with their cities? And of the same group of people, how many of them have athletes that hold out on them all the time? Neither one of those things happens to Ted Leonsis. He gets along great with his city, Washington, D.C., which is like every city has its own schizophrenia. And you never hear of an athlete holding out on Leonsis. And he has some legitimate superstars, both on his hockey teams and his basketball teams. No holdouts there. So what is this guy doing? Also, he's not in the headlines for having the highest payroll in whatever his league is. So Leonsis stands up in front of any group and he says, as a sports team owner, I want to give my fans those immortal moments that they tell their grandchildren about. That when they start to recount seeing John Wall sink the winning basket in the playoff, it's something they tell their kids about. So the message there is, if you're an athlete, Ted Leonsis wants to make you an immortal. And you will play for that guy, and you will play your heart out, and you will not hold out because you want to get in the game. The city fathers hear Leonsis, and they hear this guy wants to bring immortal experiences to our citizens, which makes them come to his games and all the ensuing tax revenue. They spend money in restaurants, they shop, they increase the tax base. And when he begins to speak to, to immortality for either side, suddenly people want to make deals with him. I mean, people make deals with Ted Leonsis everywhere. And so, what's larger? What's the larger issue? It's all the same thing, whether or not you're talking to a terrorist or whether or not you're talking to a member of the city council of Washington, D.C., there's immortality issues.
Council members are terrorists, aren't they?
Yeah, the way a local politician conducts themselves, those are always interesting operations.
It's interesting what you just said about how important the owner is from the player's perspective. As I mentioned to you earlier, I just had a magical conversation with three-time Super Bowl champion 49er Brent Jones. And one of the things he said in our dialogue was Bartolo, the owner, was the greatest football owner ever, in his opinion. And I didn't ask him that question. He just came out with it for creating the context for those legendary 49er teams. So it's an interesting thing. I think that a lot of people who are sports fans maybe don't think about how important the owner is, not just for bankrolling things, but for setting the whole tone and all of that. And so you don't think there's any difference between negotiating a hockey contract and trying to get a terrorist to give up their hostages?
There's some fundamental underlying issues that appeal to us just because we're human beings. And there's some wiring in everybody's head that there's no getting around that wiring interacts with your decision making. The neuroscientist calls this wiring the limbic system. And each and every thought that we have, every human being on the planet, every thought they have bounces through this limbic system wiring, the caveman wiring. And I happen to be, a couple of months ago, I'm in Hong Kong doing negotiation training in Hong Kong for business people and also for the Hong Kong Police Department's hostage negotiation team, because they're the same principles, whether it's business or hostage. So they run a bunch of psychiatrists into the room to me. And with the police department, a psychiatrist, a psychologist say, well, we've talked to a lot of experienced negotiators, and they say you can't negotiate with terrorists because they're not rational people. Now, I love this kind of a question from a scientist, if you will, because I'm a common dude. I'm a regular blue collar, bozo Midwestern Iowa guy.
Yeah. And
so
you live in New York. You lived in New York for a long time.
I did. There's a trace of the New York.
Yeah, I was going to
say
that's not a Scottish accent, I hear.
No, but I'm a blue collar, simple kind of guy, and I love this when I'm with highly educated people, because I love me being a dope, pointing out to them how stupid they are. And I get this room full of PhDs and master's degrees people. You can't negotiate with terrorists. And I said, really? So what terrorist doesn't have a limbic system? And they all went dead silent. Because that's the wiring that terrorist, sports agent, mother-in-law, they've all got them.
And, I'm a huge fan of yours. I love your book. I mean, absolutely love it. The title is legendary. And it was published by Harper, was it not?
HarperCollins, Harper Business, yeah.
Yeah, so we share a publisher in Hollis.
I love Hollis. She's been a big believer, a big supporter.
Yeah, as she has been for me and my co-authors. And your book came out about a year ago as well, did it not?
A year ago, May, yeah.
Yeah, so she sequenced us right after you. So you were May, we were June.
All right.
Because I think they only do roughly, I think 12 to 14 a year is the numbers that I remember.
Yeah, and then, they're like movies. They're trying to hit sweet spots on the timing to get you out there in the market at the right time.
Well, man, did you ever hit the market? I mean, just the title of the book, we've all been taught to try to negotiate in a fair way and meet in the middle and all this kind of shit. And we live in a world now, Chris, I don't have to tell you, where, this is mamby-pamby, everybody gets a cookie kind of a world and stuff. And so you're trying to make everybody nicey nice, and you're saying never split the difference.
Yeah, and I use this warm, soft, fuzzy thing that's supposed to be nice called tactical empathy to get my way, right?
Yeah, you're a master manipulator, aren't you?
Well, I like to think I'm a very nice guy. I'm a nice guy.
And so the thing I find fascinating, many things about your career, but you've done it cross-culturally, right? And so this seems like a skill, this negotiating, particularly when lives are on the line, which is, of course, where you spent a huge part of your life, where the cultural nuances and sort of the nonverbal tells and intonations in voice and choice of words and all these sort of things, on its face, I wouldn't think that negotiating to save people's lives would translate from culture to culture, but that's not at all what you're saying, is it?
Yeah, and the crazy thing, like this in hostage negotiation, is a basic set of 8 skills. We took those 8 and then added 1 for business, so we get 9. But the hostage negotiators in Cape Town, South Africa, and the hostage negotiators in Tokyo, Japan, use the exact same skills. The hostage negotiators for the Israeli Defense Forces and the Israeli Police Department use the same skills the guys in Tokyo, Japan use. Because there's a basic construction to the human being that has culture layered over the top of it. But underneath it is a human being, regardless of gender or ethnicity. And if I know how this wiring works and I know how it interacts with your decision-making, and I know, I've got dials that I can dial up and dial down a little bit. If I know how those work, I know how to turn those dials. Then, yeah, I get same set of skills for everybody. It doesn't matter what country you're
in. And what happens for an Islamic terrorist when they hear you on the other end of the line? Well,
I'll coach somebody, and the real thing that I was.
So they don't know you're there in that case.
No, they don't. I'm an international negotiation coach, really more than an international negotiator. I've coached all over the world, and all I need to do is I need to find somebody who's open to learning. You know, openness is actually a characteristic that they test for now. They're actually testing for it in professional sports, because how coachable is an athlete when he goes from college to the pros, or from the minor leagues to the pros? Guys got to be coachable.
How do they test for it, Chris?
There's actually one of the ways. There's a psychological test called the 5-factor inventory, and it tests you for 5 characteristics. One of them is openness.
And how is openness defined in this context?
Well, it really is how open are you to learning? You know, how quickly can you pick up on things, or you know, not necessarily how quick, but whether or not you're open to it at all.
Yeah.
I don't consider myself to be that quick, but I am open to learning. I constantly want to figure out, I don't care how to get it done. I just want to know the best way to get it done. And if that's your attitude, or if you're like, well, this is the way I've always been done, or this, if you're the type of person who thinks this is the way it's always been done this way, it must be a good reason, who am I to change it? You're probably not open to learning.
Right. And it is interesting that, at least I found in my life, by making a very sort of frontal choice to myself, that I have a commitment to lifelong learning.
Yeah.
And reminding myself of that, which I don't actually have to do that much, because to me, learning for me personally comes from curiosity, and I'm curious about a lot of things. Like, I'm insanely curious about what you do in your life. And so is that the source of being open, curiosity?
I think it's an absolutely necessary component. I think there's actually another couple of interesting things about that give you more mental superpowers, if you will.
Yeah. Okay.
One of the books I'm reading currently, and I kind of like the Elon Musk approach to reading. There was an article about his reading his entire life, especially in his younger days. He would always read at least 2 books at once, 2 different books, because he was looking for universal principles. And if it was a good universal principle, it would pop up in a book about, marketing and also self-improvement, because it's human nature stuff.
Yeah.
So one of the things I'm reading is The Rise of Superman. And it's about X Games.
I read the book I was so fascinated by that book. Not only did I buy the physical copy, but I bought the audio so that I could kind of go back and forth and spend time unpacking that book, and have turned many people onto that book. It's a stunning eye opener, I thought.
Yeah.
Why does it appeal to you?
Well, because all right, so X Games athletes have gone so far that we went from Evel Knievel trying to jump his motorcycle over the fountain at Caesar's Palace several years
ago. The old school Caesar's Palace.
Right. So before they turn it down, you got an X Games motorcyclist doing backflips over the palace. So, and that's not an increase in physical ability. It's an increase in the brain's ability to process information and make the right decisions, to keep the balance, how fast to go, to instantaneously make all the adjustments, the brain's ability to make the mental and physical adjustments. There just hasn't been that much of an increase in physical ability. It's all mental ability. And they're calling it flow.
Which I love. I love that word and that concept. And there's a great book called Flow, if you really want to unpack it from a happiness perspective. But anyway, the reason I'm flipping through my notes, I recently had an amazing dialogue with Eric Weinmeier on Legends and Losers, and he's an extraordinary adventure extreme athlete. He's done the 7 summits, and
Wow.
his new book is called No Barriers. You'd love it. It's about him solo kayaking the Grand Canyon. And other than all of those incredible achievements, the other thing that makes Eric notable is he's fucking blind.
Stop.
No, he's blind. He's the first blind guy ever to summit Everest. He's the first blind guy ever to solo the Grand Canyon. And I don't know about the other 7 summits. He's an amazing guy. I was like,
wow.
Absolutely riveting dialogue. Anyway, I was flipping through my notes to see what he said. He said something about this that underscores, I think, what you're saying. He said, you can't trust your brain.
Yeah, that gets us back to the caveman wiring that I was talking about earlier.
Yes.
And my understanding in a communication, what it is about somebody's brain that betrays them, and how can I affect that? But kind of what originally got us started on this track was talking about curiosity.
Yes, and the other components that lead to openness.
And if you're curious, basically that's a positive frame of mind. You're not curious and negative at the same time. To be curious, it has to be enjoyable, a positive frame of mind. The brain works up to 31% more effectively in a positive frame of mind. There's good solid data out there that backs that up.
31% more effective, your brain.
Yes.
In a positive mindset.
In a positive mindset. So if curiosity puts you in a positive mindset, pessimism makes you dumber, because by definition, you'll be in a negative mindset, which is why, before we knew how effective a positive mindset was, the rule in negotiation is he or she who cares least wins. That's an intentional effort to put you in a neutral mindset.
And to be detached from an outcome, yes?
Somewhat detached, not completely detached, but at least detached enough so that you're not afraid of losing. Your fears that's when your brain betrays you, as soon as the fear kicks in. And that's very much what the kayaker you were talking about a moment ago was talking about. That's how our brain betrays us, because it slows us down, it distracts us. We begin to see negative outcomes, which slows us. It's a downward spiral, what fear does to us. And so before we knew that being in a great mood made us smarter. And the descriptions of flow is very interesting also, because they'll initially describe it as being detached, but not dispassionate, not without passion. It's just and they'll also describe flow much closer to being an extraordinarily positive frame of mind, even bordering on ecstasy. So again, this is trying to walk this fine line of what's the proper cocktail of chemicals that our brain produces to put us in the smartest decision-making mode. And it's not negative, and it's not without passion. It's
positive, and it's with passion.
Yeah. And you can wander in the wrong direction, I think, on any avenue. The best analogy that I'm sort of working with these days is, if you think emotions are bad for decision making, then you think that water is bad for frogs.
But particular kinds of emotions, positive mindset emotions.
Right, exactly right. And now it's not that water is bad for frogs, it's what's the temperature of the water, the old boiling frog analogy, right? An academic.
By the way, I've always wanted to try that to see if is that really true? Because there's part of me that goes, that's bullshit. The frog is going to jump out of the fucking pot, right? Do you know the answer? Have you ever? I have not gone out and caught a frog and actually tried this. I'd like to know if you.
Well, they probably found that out a long time ago, before cruelty to animals was an issue, and they figured out the best way to cook a frog was to slowly raise the temperature. But now they don't let them do it anymore.
And what other things should I know about in terms of what contributes to having an open mindset?
I think it would have to be curiosity. I mean, there would have to be, you got to have an actual drive to get better, and whatever planted that in you, whether or not it's, avoiding a negative consequence. There's the old saying, I think it was in, Get Shorty, Chili Palmer, the John Travolta character, said, some people do their best work with a gun to their head. And some people, to get them to work hard, they need a gun to their head. It's not the best way to get people to work. I mean, and that's why the pursuit of passion is when people knock themselves out hour after hour after hour, and they do more work than you could ever pay them for, because they're into it. Because that's the absolute best.
You get lost in it, right? That's the greatest, right? The
Yeah.
flow experience is you get so lost. Most of us are self-conscious,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And to me, the greatest states of flow are you're so engaged in whatever it is, you go away for yourself, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. You're driven by it. You don't run out of gas. I mean, you
Yeah,
get
you're
by
just
in
charged up. Yeah, yeah.
sure, I worked the kidnapping in the Philippines one time where we were in it. I mean, it was the hardest we ever worked. And the funny part about it was bad guys are in the jungle, which meant that they were only active sunrise to sunset. And sunset, the sun goes down in the jungle. These guys are no longer communicating. And so sunset for us, I mean, it's still relatively early in a workday. At sunset is happy hour. And I'll know, we went out and socialized every night, and we were up every day at sunrise and into it.
Wait. So you're doing a hostage negotiation in the Philippines with these guys in the jungle. How many hostages?
In this particular case, it started out there were probably about 20 hostages in total, mostly Filipinos. Three Americans in the initial taking.
And what were their demands?
Money,
Just
money,
is it
insane
mostly
amounts of money.
Money in these situations?
Yeah, there's another thing about human nature. You start waving money at anybody, no matter what dyed-in-the-wool kind of terrorists they are. So as soon as money's waved in front of them, their tone changes. Every kidnapping in the world ultimately devolves into money, because I may not be able to change the world, but if you give me enough to go buy a speedboat or some jewelry, I'll be happy.
Isn't that interesting? And so I mean, it may be obvious, but the big carrot is to just dangle that money in front of them, and ultimately, if you can get them to do what you want them to do, which I assume is to release the 20 people, they have a belief they're going to get this giant pot at the end of the rainbow. Is that really just, is it the game that simple, or?
Yeah, unfortunately, it is. I mean,
It
it's
is.
the best way to handle a kidnapping is run it as a sting operation, which means you're going to wave the money into them. The money's the lure, it's the bait, it's what they lust for, and you draw them out into the open with that.
So can you sort of bring this Filipino story to to life for me? What was it? What was it, and how did it play out, and so forth?
Well, the vast majority of the Filipino hostages were ransomed out by their own families and friends. The American hostage taking ended up, interestingly enough, there's a phrase in business negotiations, in sales parlance, if you will, called being single-threaded. You get single-threaded in a deal, you get cut out. And you didn't know till it was over that you were cut out. And we actually, the people that I was coaching in this kidnapping, as it played out over months, we were single-threaded. The bad guys, ultimately, the high-value hostages, 2 out of 3 Americans were still left. They murdered an American early on, Guillermo Sabero, before anybody had a chance to try to save his life. They murdered him. They tried to sell remaining hostages simultaneously to 2 different buyers. And they tried to pull it off at the same time. Philippine government disrupted one of the buyers, the high end, the most money, and they reneged when the family tried to buy the Americans out. So then we're stuck with the family got ripped off, and we're trying.
So they gave the money to these guys and didn't get their people?
Exactly right. And what happens when you're single-threaded in a business deal, the negotiator you're dealing with thinks he is representing his group, and he has his group's backing, and he or she actually thinks they're making a good deal, which is why you can really be fooled, because all your signals from the negotiator you're dealing with are very genuine. You're dealing with someone who's actually thinks they're making a deal with you, when in fact their organization is going to cut them off, let them crawl out on that limb and saw the limb off behind them.
Is that often the case?
In business, it happens so much that there's a term for it. You wouldn't have, if being single-threaded wasn't a problem in sales and business negotiations, didn't come up a lot, it wouldn't be a term. In hostage takings, it's actually kind of a rare occurrence. The bad guys will steal your ransom, but then immediately, it's not because they have another buyer, it's just because they think that you've come to an agreement too easily, and they smell more money.
So if they say, hey, we want, I don't know, $20 million for these 5 people, and $20 million shows up, we're not getting the 5 people.
Right. They're going like, wow, that was easy. There must be more money there.
Maybe there's 40 million or whatever they might think.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
So I want to go back to the Philippines. So that you're doing the negotiations during the day, and at night you're going out and having what feels like a normal life.
Oh, yeah. You know, we go out to dinner.
Is that weird? That sounds really weird.
Well, it's a way to sort of blow up. It's a way to maintain your intensity during the day. Because when the sun rose in the morning, we were in it. And we would actually have to be up before sunrise. I can remember a number of mornings in the Philippines listening to the roosters crow, waiting for the sun to come up. We'd have to be up half an hour before the sun was. We'd have to be ready. The roosters are crowing, and shortly after sunrise, the bad guys are on the phone wanting to know where the money is.
And are you like, is it like we see in the movies where if I'm the Filipino guy actually talking to bad guys, you're whispering in my ear, now say this and say that and say this, or like, how does it work between you and whoever the actual interface with the bad guys?
Yeah, well, we don't actually whisper in his ear, but we pass him notes. You know, there'll be anywhere from 2 to 4 of us there in a room with them. We'll have an operations center. We'll have a bunch of different potential dialogue and possible responses written on sheets of paper. You know, we call them situation boards in the room. I mean, we threw up a whole support system around our negotiator. And even if you don't
speak, is it always one negotiator, or is there ever a circumstance where there's multiple people talking to the bad guys?
One talker, ideally a team of no less than 2 around him, anywhere from 2 to 7 people in support at any given moment, and coaching them. And even like while I was going on in the Philippines, the negotiations taking place in Tagalog, which is their local language. But if you're working with a translator and you know what's going to be talked about, you start reading tones of voice. I mean, we got off the phone one time, the guy I'm coaching, he looks at me and he says, have you been here long enough to learn Tagalog? Because you were handing me the note that was appropriate at the right time. Like, no, I'm just listening to the tone of voice and figuring out what's going on at about the same time.
Again, an extraordinary skill that you've developed to be able to do this cross-culturally, where you don't even need to know the meanings of the words, the tone of his voice. And of course, experience, you know that when the guy sounds like this, we're probably going here.
Yeah, I know roughly what we're talking about. And I know that, you know, we've talked about it enough. There's only 2, 3, 4 objections maximum on any given point. I hear a change in the tone of voice. I can make a pretty good guess on what that objection is. And we've already got an answer figured out for that, a response to it, or how we're going to dig into it or diffuse it. And we're just going to go with that.
And does your strategy, tactics, headset change, Chris, in a situation like this where they've already murdered somebody, I assume to show they're serious, versus, you know, some bad guys who have people, you know, some in a home, in a bank, in a wherever, and they haven't actually killed somebody? Is there a difference there?
Well, you know, everything is constantly making you smarter. Like in a kidnapping, if there's a bunch of hostages, again, it's understanding, you know, I can talk about this in the brutal reality terms because I have to understand how the other side sees it. That's the essence of negotiation. It doesn't matter how I see it. It's how you see it. I'm never going to be able to win any negotiation unless I can navigate it from how you see it, because that how you see it is going to affect your decision-making. And international kidnapping, to us, a horrific crime, a horrible crime, just short of rape and in different ways worse than murder. The bad guys see it as a commodities business.
Well, why would you say worse than murder? That's an interesting comment.
Yeah, doesn't that make you stop and think?
It sure does, yeah.
Somebody in your family gets murdered, or somebody in your family gets kidnapped. The entire family is more likely to move if you're kidnapped than if someone is murdered.
You mean physically move, like we're moving out of this town?
Or the country. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. Kidnapping kills the professional class, it renders it extinct in every country that it catches on. The first people to start to bolt out of Iraq after the war was over, quote, over.
Whatever that means.
Yeah, whatever that means. When the kidnapping industry in Iraq got out of control, are the doctors and the lawyers and, you know, the white, quote, the white collar, because they've got enough money to be kidnapped. They don't have enough money to protect themselves, to buy their own, to hire their own security teams. So,
you know, I never thought about that in that, what it does at the societal level. But you're absolutely right. I mean, in my last corporate job, I spent a bunch of time in Latin America, and depending on where we were, but in a lot of places where we were, we'd have an armed driver, and that, you know, we'd stop in front of the office building we were going to go into the meeting, and he would get out of the car and open the door and walk us to the front door and make sure, you know, and it was like very, you know, an unusual experience for a kid who grew up in Canada, right? And so I guess if you're there living there and you're a doctor and you know that doctors and other high profile folks are being kidnapped, yeah, you get the fuck out of Dodge, don't you?
exactly.
And then when all the doctors and all the high end folks from a, you know, IQ white collar perspective leave a country, what are you left with?
And then suddenly now the blue collar people start getting victimized. And then the blue collar, it's like, you know, fishing out of lake. They you know, until you've killed, kidnapped, or they've moved. And ultimately the only people that are left are the people at the poverty level, or people who are part of the bad guys, or the people that are wealthy enough to hire their own armies. Those are the only people that stay.
Interesting. So if we could just go loop back to the situation in the Philippines. So it played out for how many days, Chris?
Well, that particular kidnapping, the Burnham-Sabero kidnapping, lasted for 13 months.
Holy shit. And so, and there's no taking a day off, right?
There's no taking the day off.
So you and the team were there for
territory.
13 months, every single day, trying to save these people's lives.
Well, either, you know, I'm engaged in that every single day. Now, what we do is we build out teams and we rotate teams through. And depending upon the particular intensity of the moment, I might be running the case, but I'm not necessarily going to be myself in the Philippines. The last 6 months of the case, when it really heated up and the U.S. government really got organized to try to get them out, I was there almost the entire time.
Wow. And how does the movie end on this one, Chris?
Well, botched rescue attempt, an accidental rescue. Group of Philippine Scout Rangers stumbled over the camp where the hostages were.
So it wasn't part of any strategy.
It was a complete accident. They recognized the camp in the jungle as a terrorist camp. They had no idea it was the camp with the hostages. And because the Philippine military isn't particularly, you know, they're undertrained, underarmed, they formed a skirmish line in the trees and just opened fire on the camp. And two of the remaining, there were 2 Americans and a Filipino hostage left. Martin Burnham was killed by friendly fire. Deborah Yap, the Filipino female, she was killed. Gracia Burnham survived with a wound to the leg.
Oh my God.
It was a bad day.
Wow. I mean, obviously I'm sorry for the loss of life, of course. And I have to ask you, what does it do to you and the team when something like that happens?
You know, it's personally, I hate to say it's devastating. It's difficult. It was my worst professional day. You know, it wasn't a member of my family that got killed. I mean, I don't think I have a right to be devastated by that, because the family members have a right to be devastated. You know, they lost someone in their life that they need. Martin Burnham's kids grow up without a father. But then as a negotiator, I mean, that's sort of, you know, it's a moment where you're like, all right, I got 1 or 2 choices here. Either I find something else to do or I get better. But the status quo is now gone.
How could you even, that one was completely out of your control, right?
And that doesn't mean that you're still not going to go back and look at it and say, all right. And what I really did was we reviewed it and we knew that everything we did, we ran it by the numbers, if you will. And that's when I said, all right, so what we know is not enough. We got to know more. Let's look at this and figure out how to get better. And that was actually when I started going into the business world. I ended up at Harvard Law School going through their negotiation class because I was just trying to get better.
And did you now add something to the procedure that says we need to understand who all of the law enforcement and or military are operating in the theater, and nobody does anything until they talk to us? Is that
well, that,
like an obvious one, but I would have thought maybe you had that covered.
Nah, that's never going to entirely happen. I mean, every agency, it's herding cats.
Yeah.
So we just all right. So what could we have done differently? How could, and we changed our proof of life strategy after that case, and the changes we made as a result of what we learned in that case saved lives down the line. So the hostages.
Give me a couple examples of the changes.
There were two subsequent cases. One I worked in Ecuador. I think they're both in the book. The Ecuadorian case, Pepe Escobar. We did the new proof of life strategy in that case. And the great outgrowth of it was they actually never, ever gave us proof of life in Pepe's case. And Pepe escaped after about 28 days. And I couldn't wait to sit down and talk to him because this was our new strategy. And I'm like, we never got proof of life. It must have been a failure. And afterwards, I'm sitting down with him and I said, this is what we're doing. This is what was going on. And he goes like, yeah, he says, it was crazy. The negotiator that was negotiating to get the ransom, he was supposed to stay in town the entire time till he settled on a ransom before he came back out to the jungle. Instead, he kept coming back out to the jungle and saying like, hey, they're asking me, how do we know if Pepe's alive? What should we do? Should we take Pepe to town? Should we put him on a phone? But what that did was that took us out of this single-threaded dynamic. It kept our negotiator from operating independently. He stayed plugged into his team the whole time and engaged with his team. It changed everything on the other side of the table. So even though we didn't get proof of life, we aligned everybody on the other side and immediately got out of this whole dynamic known as being single-threaded. And that's when we knew we had the upper hand because we had never done that before.
And just so I'm clear, what would you say is the definition of single-threaded?
Well, single-threaded is you're dealing with a negotiator who thinks he's making a deal. He or she really is making a deal with you. As far as they're concerned, they're completely genuine.
Yep.
In fact, they're not that connected into their own team, into their own company. And so there are people that are jealous of them. There are people that are trying to undermine them.
In other words, they may not have the organization the way they think they do.
Yeah, the organization is not back behind them as much as they think. We were discussing training for a major telecommunications company last year. We find out behind the scenes that fully 50% of the deals this telecommunication company signs, half the deals they sign, never get implemented, which means half the time people dealing with them are getting single-threaded. They think they're making a deal. They sign a deal. Then the deal goes back to the company, and the company says, nah, we're not doing this. And half their deals.
It's amazing. It's fascinating you say that because in the software industry, particularly pre-cloud, although it still happens today, we have a term for it. We call it shelfware.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Somebody goes off and buys all this stuff, and they go, fuck it, and it just sits there. And sometimes they pay maintenance on it. But there's a lot. Software turnarounds are really hard and not impossible, but really, really hard. But one of the things you do look at is in the old days, you looked at shelfware. Today, you tend to look more at renewals because of the cloud and all that. Right. But yeah, fascinating. So you've got to. Does that say then, Chris, we got to be negotiating with multiple people on the other side to make sure we got them, or we got to see evidence of multiple folks on the other side sort of playing with the negotiator? What should we look for to understand we're not in this single-threaded situation?
All right. So first thing is you got to figure out who your guy is with them. And, interestingly enough, your counterpart's use of personal pronouns is going to be a dead giveaway. If they're really into the I, me, my singular pronouns, like, well, this is what I want to do and this is what I think, and they love I, me, my. That guy is on an island. That guy far underestimates, he overestimates his own internal influence. He may not have any influence. Now you're talking to a counterpart.
In a hostage situation, I see how that works in business. People get off on stuff and maybe they don't have the signing authority or whatever it is. In a hostage situation, sort of unpack for me how that's true in a hostage situation.
Well, that's the reason why we get them talking. And we use empathy, because the more empathy I use with a hostage taker, the more I can get his perspective of himself. Get him talking about anything. Get him reacting to me. I need him reacting. I need him talking. I need to lay down some baselines. I need I need two baselines. First one is, what does this guy sound like when he's telling the truth? And how much influence does he have with the other side? And if I can figure those two things out, I'm golden. Because then it becomes predictable, and I know how to adjust my strategy.
So how do I tell someone's telling me the truth versus lying?
It's exactly the way a lie detector works, and it's the reason why a good polygrapher, a guy who knows how to operate a polygraph, can actually tell you're lying before he puts you on the box. They ask you control questions. What'd you have for breakfast? What day is it? What's your mother's maiden name? A number of questions that you should tell the truth to. And I'm going to lay down what you look like when you're telling the truth. Hey, how you doing today? How was your drive in? What'd you drive? What do you drive anyway? The normal small talk gives me an opportunity to tell what you look like when you're telling the truth. And then as soon as I wander in, I don't have to know how you lie, because everybody lies 7 or 8 ways, but they tell the truth one way. So if I get a good fix on what you look like when you're telling the truth, whatever you do when you lie, which is look down, look up and to the left, turn your head to the side, make a slight tilt, change your tone of voice, you probably got 4 ways you lie.
So all that pop psychology stuff that I think a lot of us have heard over the years, like the ones you just mentioned, look up or what, don't break eye contact, all those sorts of things. Those are in the parlance of our times, legit ways of knowing if somebody is likely lying.
Well, they're legit ways if that's the way you lie.
That's why you got to get what you have for breakfast.
Right.
But the truth is the baseline.
Right. And and the other thing too is you're going to lie multiple ways, but you only tell the truth one way. So there was Jimmy Kimmel. What was it, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago? He did this great segment called "Lie Witness News."
Oh, I love that. So funny.
Yeah, it's hysterical.
So funny, right? Where they go and they tell somebody, what did you think of the speech that Donald Trump made today? And there was no speech, and they just keep lying and lying. So why do people lie in that situation? Why didn't they just say, I didn't see a speech?
There's a great question, professing ignorance, trying to feel like you don't know what's going on. I mean, people, it's kind of crazy to lie in a well-intentioned way. I mean, what's a white lie? I'm telling you a lie because I want to preserve the relationship.
Right. All right. We all have a desire, particularly if we like the other person, to not make them feel bad. So if the truth is maybe a little bit less flattering, or maybe we think we have this thing, right, where we think we're doing something nice by saying, hey, the reason I'm late is there was a traffic situation, versus, hey, I was doing something else with somebody else and I said, fuck it, you can wait. Like, right? We massage it a little, right?
Yeah. You don't want the other person to feel like you devalued them when you did, but you don't want to hurt their feelings. Yeah. That's a white lie, right?
And so the only way you can know a person is doing that is if you have a baseline for what they look like, sound like, and how they behave when they're telling the truth.
Exactly.
Yeah. Fascinating. Now, let's unpack. Why do you say never split the difference? And what do you really mean by that?
All right. So there are 2 or 3 separate reasons, all of them should put you on your guard. There's an old saying, the person who wants to meet me in the middle is often a bad judge of distance.
I love that.
Yeah. So whenever I'm training someplace in a company, at some point in time, because, I also say win-win is bad. And I'll have somebody walk up to me, usually early in training, go like, what's wrong with win-win? I think win-win's a good idea. I use win-win negotiations. I split the difference all the time. I make these deals. They're actually a cutthroat negotiator. They come in always asking for 5 times as much as they want, because they know that if they have a high anchor or a low anchor, then they can look at you and say, hey, you know what? But what do you say? Why don't we just do what's fair here and meet in the middle? Let's split the difference. Hey, they didn't do anything that was fair. They didn't meet you in the middle. They just moved the goalpost so they could end up where they wanted to be the whole time. And you felt like you got a deal.
Isn't that funny? Now, what about, I hear things in business all the time that say, listen, I don't have time to fuck around doing all this shit, playing all this garbage with you. This is the deal from my side. I'm not negotiating. Take it or leave it. And I think there's almost a pride to, hey, listen, I could 5X this thing. We could argue. Let's not do any of that stuff. Let's just say, this is my ask. Hit the bid or go fuck yourself. Why does that? What's your impression of that?
These are people that are scared to talk. I mean, that's a real fear-driven approach.
Is it?
Because the other thing that's absolutely true is, and this is kind of like a 3-stage to think your way through this. But there's never going to be a deal when you're not holding cards. There's never going to be a deal when you're not hiding stuff from the other side. So number one, you've always got stuff you're hiding. And number two, why are you hiding it? Because it's important. It would make all the difference in the world if you laid your cards on the table. But if you laid your cards on the table, you'd be vulnerable, or you think you would be. Never happened. That's not the case. If it's true for you, it's true for them. So, which means both sides are holding cards, and you can't see the other side's cards. So what would happen if we combine those cards? Let's say we were playing poker and Texas Hold'em, where you use cards from the middle of the table. Let's say you could use the other guy's cards if you agreed to split the pot. And then you'd probably win every hand. So you can't know the best deal because you don't know what the other side's holding, and they don't know what you're holding. So if you say, this is what the deal is, this is what it's got to be, you're actually scared to find out that you don't know everything.
Interesting. And so is the strategy then, Chris, to try to get to a place where all the cards are on the table, or is the strategy, I want to get all your cards on the table?
Well, first of all, if you're afraid to put your cards on the table, then you're already taking yourself hostage. You're saying, if I told them this, I'd have to say yes. I'm a hostage. And that's all in the mind of the beholder. Like, if you say, look, I got to make this deal by Friday, or my company's going bankrupt, I can't tell them that. Or you can say, look, my company's going bankrupt by Friday. If you don't make this deal, we don't have a deal. It's all in your attitude. Is it a weakness or is it a strength? It's all right. It's how you pitch it. How you.
I've seen that in the technology business so many times, right? Because of course most companies are quarterly driven, and it's the end of the quarter or the end of the year, and obviously there's a massive push to get the deals done, and things change a lot on Jan 1 from December 31, right? A lot, and I have seen so many salespeople who are the victim of that when they're selling, right? And to your point, the guys that I've learned the most from in my life use the end of our quarter to their advantage. Because to use a poker term, a gambling term, that puts them on a decision.
Yep.
Are we doing a deal by January 31st or not? Because if we're not, I need to move on, right?
There you go.
And that gets people's attention, right? What do you mean you're going to move on? Listen, I don't have time to talk to you unless you're going to do this transaction this quarter. So that's the first thing you're going to need to tell me, is that we're doing business this quarter. It sets a frame. Is that what you're talking about? To
Yeah.
use what you got, and that is also a way to put things on the table.
Right. Exactly. And I like, instead of using my weaknesses as a reason why, if you don't fix this, we have no deal. And it's
You
all
like
in whether or
that.
not you
Say,
spend.
hey, listen, I got to have this. And
Yeah.
so
Because
I've
I'm going to
heard,
move on.
years ago, I did the CARIS training, the negotiating training.
Everybody's done that.
Yeah. And I did it because I grew up, as an entrepreneur and selling and marketing and stuff. And I thought my ex-wife was a software buyer for a while. So she did the training. And I thought, wait a minute, I should do the training that the people on the other side are taking, not just the sales training. And so I did. And I found that stuff incredibly interesting, to be able to learn those techniques. And one of the things they always. So anyway, before I go there, what do you think of the sort of traditional CARIS-like negotiating training that's been prevalent in business for so long?
Well, what'd you learn?
The thing that I remember the most is that every deal can be made better for both sides, and
Right.
so try to make the deal better. And often there are non-financial ways, because in business we get stuck on the money, and maybe we do in hostages, but sometimes there are non-financial things that we can do. So that's really the only thing I remember. I mean, it was probably, not 30 years ago, but 25 years ago. But yeah, I think that's all I remember.
What it cost you to learn that?
Oh, a whole bunch of time and a whole bunch of money. And you could have told me in 2 seconds and I probably would have remembered it.
All right. So that's not, first of all, it's not a bad start.
Okay.
But it's a little bit like, I quote Stephen Covey all the time. Seek first to understand, then be understood. All right. All right. So Stephen, I get it. But how do I do that? Do I say, I understand? That didn't work. The difference between what I teach people is, there are some basics that you ought to be doing. But I teach you, all right, so do this, do this, do this. Here are 8 skills. Here's how you design it. Covey, seek first to understand, then be understood. How do you know if you understand? The other side says, that's right, in response to what you just said. Not you're right, but that's right. You have to understand the difference between you're right and that's right.
There's a big difference between you're right and that's right.
You're right is the worst false agreement out there. You're right is what you say. You're right is what you say to somebody that you want them to stop talking and leave you alone. The world's greatest practitioners who have raised the art of you're right to a new level to make their lives better and easier in every way, shape, and form. Do you know who that is? Husbands.
Hey, that shit works, right?
It does work.
I'll introduce you to my Sicilian on both sides wife, and you'll understand that you're right works really well.
There you go. And you go back and you watch the ball game, or you go play golf, or you go play cards with the boys and go drink beer. You go back and do all the same stuff that she tried to talk you out of. You just look at it and say, hey, you want us to be happy. And you go, you're right. And she leaves you alone. You go back to what you were doing.
But then when we say to her, that's right, that's an indication I'm going to change or my behavior.
When somebody utters those words, they utter them as a response to what they've just heard is the complete truth, and they embrace it. And you look around the workplace at any given moment in time. 2 people are talking. One person is passionate. The other person is looking at them saying, you're right, you're right, you're right. You can almost see the hand going up to the face. And the person who says you're right is always leaning back. It's a way of saying really subtly, either I don't have the energy or the words to defeat your logic or your argument. I just want you to stop talking.
So maybe a sign of apathy in some cases.
It could be. It could be. But conversely, when you say that's right, I mean, you're 1,000% into what has just been said.
Yeah.
And actually I had somebody at a conference once came up to me and he said, I think when somebody says that's right to you, they're confirming that they feel empathy from you. Like, bang, then you just hit Covey's mark.
That's the Covey, right.
That's the Covey. And now the other person's ready to listen. Their ears open up And since they feel this connection with you, the chances of them doing whatever they can, if they feel like it, just become exponentially increased.
And how important is the, in old school sales training, we used to call it listen to talk ratio, the percentage of time you're listening versus talking. And, we all got trained that the more they talk, the more they buy. So the best salespeople learn to shut the fuck up and let them talk 80, 90% of the time.
Right.
What's your reaction to that?
Well, it's that plus a little bit more. I mean, it's got to be interactive. I mean, and now that's why we refer to it as tactical empathy, because we know too much more about it now. So I'm gonna listen for certain things, and when I have an understanding of what I'm listening for in advance, I'm listening for what you like, what you don't like. I know I got to get what you like. I got to ramp it up. I know what you don't like. I got to turn it down. Those are the moments that I actually need to speak up in very strategic ways to affect your thought pattern and move you one direction or another. So it's not that I got to sit there and in silence for 20 minutes and I can only speak for 3. In the 20 minutes that you're talking, I need to have interacted at certain strategic moments to now begin to guide this in a certain direction.
And would you agree with this? I mean, this has sort of been an axiom for a while. Is, we don't get what we deserve in life. We get what we negotiate. Do you think that's right?
Yeah, that's a Kara saying. There's a little bit more to it.
Saying, okay, well, maybe I remember more than I thought.
That's a phrase that's stuck. It ideally it wises you up to the idea that it's going to require more than just telling people what you want. And so, how do we influence it? And do we beat it out of them, or do we get it out of a great collaboration? And one of the big problems with most people's attitude towards the negotiation is they think they have to win. Well, if I got to win, that means you got to lose, which means it's going to leave a bad taste in your mouth.
Yeah.
Which means you're going to pay me back on the next deal. You're going to try and enact a little bit of retribution. I don't like leaving that in my wake, because I know you're going to try and pay me back if you feel like you were beaten. And I want to avoid that.
And in general, it sounds like you don't necessarily advocate going right at it, do you?
No, it's an indirect route. Shortest distance between 2 points is not a straight line.
So you advocate an indirect route, not sort of sitting down and saying you're doing a deal with somebody and you say, hey, listen, there's 5 things that matter to me in a deal like this. Here are they? Boom, 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 and just go straight at it. No.
Yeah, I don't like that at all, because if I'm sitting across the table from a smart negotiator, they want more information from me than they want to give me. And if I list the 5 things
more from you than you want to give them.
Yeah, they want the information going one way. So if I just laid out the 5 things I have to have, one of them might have been what they thought was a throwaway, that they figured they were going to give away because it didn't matter. Now suddenly they're sitting on a throwaway that has great value. Ooh, they're going to bargain harder over this. I've inadvertently, I'm now on the wrong side of the information flow here. Plus, if these are 5 things they got to have, they're 5 things they can take me hostage over. I've got no context whatsoever. I'm throwing this stuff out. Shrewd negotiator on the other side is just going like, yeah, wow, oh, ooh. And let's say there was something they planned on giving me for nothing to soften me up. Let's say I want a delivery on my product in a week. And they're desperate to clear their warehouse, and they want to deliver it in a week because they need the warehouse space. But if they know I really want it, they're going to be like, I don't know, delivery in a week, geez, it's going to be hard for us. Now suddenly they're getting paid a lot of money for something they plan on giving away,
or maybe even need to, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so, what is an effective but yet still, if you say in a business deal. Certainly any deal I would be associated with today personally, it would be people I want to do business with, people I care about, beyond just a transaction. And so you're trying to do a good deal. You're building a relationship. It's a long-term thing, right? And so when you have that sort of a headset, hey, yes, we need to make money. Yes, yes, yes. But I'm trying to build a long-term relationship with these folks. And I do want to have a good relationship, and I do want them to be successful as well as me. You know, if that's really your true headset, but you're also saying, hey, don't be stupid and be direct and tell them the 5 things you have to have. So I guess my question, Chris, is how do I be authentic and open and wanting to actually do good business with these people, but at the same time not be a stupid fuck who does a bad negotiation?
Yeah, no. Well, if there's potentially a better deal for me, there's potentially a better deal for you. I mean, there may be some way that we can think something up that you're going to get this great benefit out of that you never thought of. One of my favorite examples is I spoke at a conference for free, and I don't speak for free. So how did I speak for free? Well, it was a conference that was in an industry I wanted to get into. They had no money for fees. They had money for travel. They could give me some, take care of me in the travel. They could buy books for every attendee in the conference. So bang, there's another 300 books that's going out the door that is good for my book sales, plus begins to, it has a great follow-on effect. But then, interestingly enough, their organization had a national magazine. And I said, well, what if we co-author an article and it goes in your national magazine? Now the coordinator of the conference, now suddenly she's got an opportunity to be published in their national magazine, which she didn't have before. Their national organization is putting out the magazine anyway. They need stuff to put in it. This is a way for them to get a great speaker for the local organization. It doesn't cost them a dime. They needed an article anyway. They have never had an article that was focused on negotiation, based on hostage negotiation ideas. So now they got a brand new piece of content that we write it as an interactive Q&A article. So the person chairing the conference, now she's published. She wasn't published before. She hadn't even thought about it. All she wanted me to come and speak at her conference. Next thing you know, based on a deal, she's published in her national magazine. So that's, and I've got no shortage of referrals and follow-on business and continued recommendations. And then they went ahead and videotaped the speech. And I didn't know for sure that they were going to videotape. And they went ahead and posted it on the web. And now there's a video of me giving a talk at that conference on the web that's got a bunch of views. So when you start, what can we collaborate with? This is not a win-lose. This is us advancing our agendas in ways we didn't even expect until we started to talk.
And so is that the big takeaway? How to be a legendary negotiator is to be a good conversationalist. Let's get talking about what we could do together and how we could do it.
Yeah, trigger brainstorming, get into the curiosity, positive frame of mind that we were talking about earlier. When suddenly somebody says, hey, wait a minute, what did you just say? Because that made me think of something else. Could we collaborate on this? Well, what about this idea? How crazy is this? And then it actually, you come up with some great stuff. And what do they say about you afterwards? Wow, it was cool.
That was a great guy. Yeah, he was really with us.
Yeah, we got so much more out of that deal than we ever expected. And that's what I think people should say after deals. This phrase, both sides were unhappy, therefore it was a good deal. That's not what people talk about after they make deals with me and my company, my colleagues.
Stupid, right?
Yeah,
stupid. I mean, especially for those of us who want to be in long-term business relationships. Right. I mean, I just started to work with a company, and the CEO and I just met. We have a relationship in common, and very early on in the discussion, I said to him, "Hey, listen, I want a long-term relationship with you. This is not a transaction for me. And they're a very early stage company. I said, my dream is that 5-6 years from now, I'm 3 rows back when you're pressing the button on the NYSE of the IPO, and that, you and I are friends and colleagues for decades to come." And he said, that's how I feel too. And to your point, the whole conversation starts to open up. And at least in part, it was by me declaring what my true intention was.
And then you put yourself in a position where everybody prospers.
I'm trying to, and I fucking mean it. Like I really do mean it. I don't want to do it otherwise, right?
Yeah.
Just like your conversation around that speech. Now I'm curious, how do you do that with a terrorist that's holding people hostage? How do you get to that open, positive, the mindset we just described when you did the free speech, or I'm getting a deal done with the CEO?
Well, at some point in time, everybody aspires to greatness. Everybody aspires to immortality.
Hmm.
And whatever it is that they're doing is just a means to an end. So, is there a way to find another means to your end? Is just recognition of that you aspire to greatness. That's going to take a lot of steam out of their actions anyway. I mean, how far can I get with it sounds stupid, but I get a long way with emotional recognition and appreciation. Maybe it's not going to get me, it's not going to make all my deals. In business, it might, I don't want to spend my dollars where I don't need to. And with bad guys, we don't need to take tactical action if we can talk them out. Certainly willing to take tactical action if necessary, set them up for it if we need to. But, let's be lazy. Why do we have to waste the extreme actions or the stuff that makes it the stuff that's harder for us to give up? I don't waste it on frivolous things, on stuff I don't have to. I make every deal I can make without taking those actions. Whatever percentage that cuts down, I don't care if it's 2%. I don't care if the flip side, if it's 90%. I just don't bother with stuff that I don't have to do if I can use, smart tactical communication to get what I want instead.
And that starts with a more empathetic position towards the other person.
Yeah, with the tactical application of empathy. And the flip side of it too, and even as we're talking, I realize this. I mean, a terrorist wants immortality as a terrorist, which is the reason why they're doing the terrorist event. The last thing they want is immortality as a coward or immortality as a criminal.
Even so, if you're saying maybe in their head they said, "Look, I'm probably going to die doing this dumb thing, but I want to be immortal for the right reasons."
Right.
Interesting.
Right.
So you got to create a condition for them to achieve that level of immortality, at least in their mind, that's what's going to happen by doing whatever it is you're saying they need to do.
Or our threat is to make them immortal as cowards, as miscreants, as misfits, as losers. And as soon as they see the action they're going to take has the potential to make them look like common criminals, when what they're willing to die for is to be a terrorist. They're not willing to die to be a common criminal. They're not willing to die to be a thug, to be a coward.
And if this is a topic you don't want to talk about, by all means, let me know. But if I don't know why this one's in my head, but if I think about the tragedy in Waco, Texas, is that a motivation for a guy like a David Koresh, where when the government says, "Hey, enough's enough, we're coming in, we're going to put an end to this," he wants to die in his own way as a martyr, and so he does what he does? Is that he's choosing his place in history in his mind? Is that what's going on?
I think, and Chris was a sociopath. I mean, he just wanted to manipulate and sexually abuse as long as he possibly could. So yeah, he was definitely trying to orchestrate it. And had he felt that he would have, the world was seeing him as just what he actually was, as opposed to some sort of a martyr, I'm sure would have changed his decision to set that place on fire.
So the way to have a successful outcome in that situation would have been to try to figure out how to make Koresh think that he was going to be the martyr that he wanted to be, as opposed to the guy on the wrong end of a dumb conversation with the government.
Yeah, understand what his compensation really is, what the currency really is, what's really at stake for that side. And then, there's one or two questions. Can they get it a different way? Or simply, can I make your actions as a way for you to lose it? There's a psychological truism that actually won the Nobel Prize called prospect theory, which means we'll do things to avoid loss before we'll do things to accomplish gain.
Yes. Isn't that true for pretty much everyone?
1,000%.
Yeah.
Avoiding loss is a much stronger motivation than achieving gain. Loss stings twice as much as gain.
Yep. You
All
can't
you got to do is just recharacterize it into a loss.
So you change the headset of the bad guy such that their current behavior equals a loss, and whatever you're suggesting equals a win.
Well, you'll need to get to the win if you can't get what you need by avoiding the loss.
I see. So you don't even get to the win. We need to get them centered on the loss.
Right. Because it is the single, there's some psychologists that actually contend that every single decision we make is based on our own personal calculation of loss avoidance, of fear of loss. Now, I'm not sure if it's every single decision that we make as human beings, but I'm satisfied if some psychologists think it's everyone, it's at least a big player.
Yeah. Now, I've read in the past that when a shooting occurs, that very rarely does somebody just pick up a gun and shoot another person, that there's a dialogue that takes place before the trigger gets pulled. And I've also read that often the last thing the person who gets shot says is something like, "You don't have the balls to shoot me." Is any of that shit true?
Well, I don't know. I don't have information on that. I mean, and I never made a living working homicides per se.
Sure.
I worked terrorism, which included homicides, but it's not working homicides per se. I got some.
Been back in your SWAT days?
No, not focused on homicide per se. I did go through the NYPD's homicide investigation course, which is a phenomenal course. And that particular thing didn't come up. Okay. I haven't heard it.
Now, so, I certainly know in self-defense situations, bar fights, all those sorts of dumb sort of things, it's almost impossible to imagine there isn't talking that takes place.
There's a lot of woofing that goes on. It's been my experience that the most effective fighters say the least. A really physically effective fighter is not going to say that much. He's going to assess the situation. He's going to decide whether or not he wants to fight, whether or not they're mad enough to fight. And then they make very little noise. I mean, they just go right for it.
And so what advice would you have in a self-defense situation? I'm at the ATM machine and somebody comes up behind me and puts a knife in my back and says, "Give me all your money," or, the bar situation, or I turn down the wrong street, or somebody breaks into my house. Now, what are the things that normal civilians should do when confronted with a potentially violent situation, and we do have the opportunity to use our brains and our mouths to deal with it?
Smartest thing is always getting out of there. I mean, the smartest thing is always just getting out of there. I mean,
if you can't,
then now we're going context. What's the context?
It's different every time. Yeah.
Somebody going to rob me? Give me your stuff. How fights are portrayed on television and how they play out in reality, two different things. You're not going to get into a fight without hurting some part of you, even when you win. That's why cops real early on stop punching people, because they break their hands. And then they suffer with a broken hand for weeks upon weeks upon weeks, even if it's a fight that they won.
In self-defense classes, of course, we teach palm strikes as opposed to fists for that exact reason.
So, what we imagine fights to be and what they have a tendency to work out to be are typically two different things. And I got to say, Chris, I'm going to run out of time here before too long.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to be respectful of your time. I just love this conversation. And I'd be remiss, maybe I could let you go on this one. I currently have 5 of my nephews and nieces visiting, and they are all under the age of 5. How do you
Oh,
negotiate with a child?
call in a SWAT team. Now, if they can make sentences at all, they can answer what and how questions. And what and how questions are designed to make people think, which is what you want to do with a human being at any age, particularly a child in their formative years. You're going to want to encourage them to think.
So use what and how questions with children and just try to get them to think.
Get them thinking, yeah.
Yeah. Anything else before we wrap up?
Tell people they can follow up if they want to subscribe to the newsletter or anything like that.
Absolutely. When we do the intro and the outro for this dialogue, they'll have all your contact information. And I love your book. I think everybody should read it.
Thank you.
And I also tactical question on your services. I know you get engaged with corporations and go do this training. But if I, as an individual person, thought, hey, shit, I'd like to go to a Chris Voss class, and I'm not part of a company that's going to go sign up for one of your programs. Do you do open workshops like that?
Yeah, we do. We do 1-day open enrollment trainings. We got one coming up in DC on August the 18th, I believe. And that's also part of the information we put out in the newsletter is when we're doing those and how to sign up for them.
I got to believe you're in massive demand in Silicon Valley, are you not?
It's picking up there. Yeah, we're getting more and more going on there. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, I would love to see you when you get out here if you get a chance. You're an incredible guy. You're an inspiring guy. You've written an incredibly important book. I think your book probably took a few resources from HarperCollins to focus on off a play bigger. Because it's such a big. I'm just joshing with you. And I can't thank you enough, Chris. You're unbelievable. You're doing incredibly important work. And also thank you so much for your service.
Thanks, man. My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Continue to be legendary, my friend.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Whew. There he is. Hostage negotiator extraordinaire, entrepreneur, educator, author, and just a fascinating and wonderful, generous guy, Chris Voss. Now, if you like this episode, you'll love episode 38 with, it's called Lead Like a Navy SEAL with author, entrepreneur, and U.S. Navy SEAL, Chris Fussell. Also want to let you know that we have our big One Life Fully Lived event happening a little bit later this year in Sacramento, California, October 21 and 22. And One Life is an amazing organization. We help you dream, plan, and live your best life. Lots to learn, lots to share, lots of masterminding. If you're a regular listener, you'll know why I find that funny, to be done. And it's really a wonderful event. Hundreds of people get together, great speakers, and really we work on how to design a legendary business, a legendary life, a legendary career, how to get your finances together. And it's just an amazing organization founded by my good friend, Tim Rode, and run by Brian Rocha. OneLifeFullyLived.org. Come see us in Sacramento in October. I am also on tour with our good friends at NetSuite, the Next Ready Business Tour, October 24th, San Diego, September 20, Denver, September 26, Toronto, Canada, September 27, New York, and November 9, Miami. We're going to be talking about category design, the future of business, the future of technology, how technology is a competitive weapon, particularly for emerging, growing entrepreneurial businesses. And if you want to come see me and get your copy of Play Bigger sign, meet the legendary Jason Maynard from NetSuite, who will also be speaking, one of the smartest guys I know. He used to be a super ding-dong Wall Street analyst, and now he's a senior executive at NetSuite, and other smart people. So come out and see me. See us on the road. Have a good time. Have a cocktail. For more information, go to legendsandlosers.com and click on NetSuite Tour, or just send email to blackhole@legendsandlosers.com, and we'll make sure our friends at NetSuite get you the info you want for your VIP invitation to the city you're interested in. Also would like to shout out to my old buddy, Ramsey Smith. Thank you so much for your kind email, Ramsey. It's great to hear from you. I also need to shout out to my new buddy in the United Kingdom, or as you might like to think about it, the Excited Kingdom, Phil Newton. I think I might have shouted out to you before, Phil, but he's been so fucking funny on Facebook. He's fantastic. If you're a member of the Legends and Losers Facebook group, you could see his funny post with Elmo or one of those Disney characters. I won't tell you what he says. It's worth reading on your own. And I also want to shout out and give a very big namaste to Morgan Wright, the security expert and guru who was just with us on Legends and Losers. If you have not checked out Morgan Wright, you really have to. He is funny. He is smart. And he is one of the foremost experts in the world on computer, cyber security, terrorism, and the like. And he just gave us a wonderful, wonderful iTunes review. So thank you, Morgan. And man, we can't wait to have you back on Legends and Losers. Speaking of Legends and Losers, check us out at legendsandlosers.com. Subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. Please give us a legendary review. We love it. Your reviews drive our success, and we appreciate it. You can find us on facebook.com/groups/legends and losers, on Twitter at Legends Losers, and again, our email, blackhole@legendsandlosers.com. We would like to thank HarperCollins, Instant Classic Play Bigger, How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. Equity Directory, connecting legendary startups to the talent and resources they need to build a legendary business. Our good friends at NetSuite, #1 in cloud ERP, Next Ready Business Tour. Come out and see us. OneLifeFullyLived.org. Dream it, plan it, and live it. Hope to see you in Sacramento. Our good friends at Spiro, the sales app for salespeople and sales managers who like to make money. Verve Coffee Roasters in Santa Cruz, California. Verve is the coffee of Legends and Losers. Our good friends Daniel West and the team at the Museum of Failure in beautiful Sweden at museumoffailure.se, the official museum of Legends and Losers. Outposition.com, legendary marketing and category design in Singapore. Pursuingresults.com, the producers of legendary podcasts, and this one, Interview Valet, podcast interview marketing. Get your butt on some podcasts and get some business done. Never Split the Difference, the smash hit from HarperCollins by our friend and guest today, Chris Voss. Man, is that worth reading. And the World Wildlife Fund, because our planet and wildlife matter. This Oddcast is the sole property of the Legends and Losers Oddcast Network, and we would love it if you shared the shit out of it. All rights do remain disturbed. The producers, I don't know what a pooser is. The pooser of this Oddcast may have been consuming libations. This Oddcast was produced in a studio that does contain nuts. Legends and Losers may also contain forward-looking statements, backward-looking statements, present moment-looking statements, and totally fucked up statements. So don't forget, actual results in future events could differ materially from everything. Listen to Linkin Park, R.I.P. Chester Bennington. Don't forget, Legends and Losers is never tested on GMOs. Support your local category designer. Also, never forget the left lane is for speeding, not for nut chilling. Teach entrepreneurship, shower weekly, support your local law enforcement. And hey, Colin, this Oddcast really ties the room together, doesn't it? Our deepest apologies today go to the supreme leader of North Korea, Kim Dong-Hoo Flung-Poo. Sorry, Kimmy. We just ran out of time for you. That's it, my legendary friends. We'll see you next time on Legends and Losers.